Hello everybody and welcome to the latest episode of the Royal Blue Podcast. I'm your host Conor O'Neill, joined today by a full squad as we have Joe Thomas, Gavin Buckland and Matt Jones with myself to look back on Everton's 2-2 draw with Sheffield United at Bramall Lane on Saturday afternoon, as well as looking back on the transfer window, Alex Iwobi's departure, Demari Gray's interesting comments which he made on Sunday, and of course looking at the ins and outs from the summer window and asking the big question of all, is Everton's squad stronger or weaker than it was when the window first opened? But Joe, I'll start with you. You were at Bramall Lane with myself on Saturday for Everton's latest Premier League encounter against Sheffield United. The Blues, I think it was safe to say we saw the good, the bad and the ugly side of Everton perhaps throughout that 99 minutes at Bramall Lane, taking the lead through Abdullah Corey before being pegged back. Then Arnold Danjuma equalised. I think it looked like both sides were about to settle for a point before Jordan Pickford's heroics in the last minute ensured Everton picked up their first point of the season. What were your thoughts heading back to Merseyside from Yorkshire on Saturday evening?
It's a really difficult game to interpret, I think. The question that I asked Sean Dyche at the end was whether that was a missed opportunity or a valuable point gained. His answer was unclear, really, just like I think most of ours probably would be as well. I think we can all agree that it's vital that Everton got off the mark, having gone through their worst start to a Premier League campaign. You know, getting a point on the board is useful. Getting first goals was useful as well. I also think that there were elements of the display that were pleasing and positive. On the flip side, of course, we anticipate that Everton are probably going to have a difficult season this year. We would like to think that Sheffield United are one of the obvious teams that are going to finish beneath Everton. And if Everton finish outside that bottom three, these are the type of games where, particularly when they get themselves into positive positions, they've probably got to try and win, and they of course failed to do that. So it's a long-winded answer to what is a straightforward question. I think the reality is the value will only become clear in time. They need to use that point as a stepping stone that has to give them the platform into the season. But you know they could so easily come away with nothing. And Dyche after the game said to me, thought it would have been an injustice had they lost that game. And I think that would have been fair. Yeah. I don't think they deserved to lose that game. I think they did get themselves into a number of good positions. I think there were times when they really were in the ascendancy. That's a positive. The disappointing thing is that having gone 1-0 up and being on top and silenced the home crowd, and then having been so dominant in that first 15 minutes of the second half and getting that equaliser, then failed to go on and take a win. So there is a bit of everything in that performance. We're all probably going to think a lot about it over the next 2 weeks, but I don't think any of us are going to come to a clear conclusion just yet as to what the defining takeaway from it is.
Gav, was that a game that Everton could not afford to lose more than a must win?
Oh, definitely. I think when you've lost 3 and you've not scored a goal, you've got to avoid the defeat. So on that basis, I was pleased with the points, I was pleased with the 2 goals. I was pleased with our increased attack and threat. I was also pleased that Pickford, after having a couple of ropey games with ropey decisions, and I was pleased that he showed some, not just the saves at the end, but there was 2 other great saves during the course of the game. So for me, there was lots of positives to take from the match. But to give a long-winded answer to a straightforward question, as Joe said, I still don't know whether it's a point gained or 2 points dropped. I think only the next 2 or 3 games will bear that out, but there was a positive to take from the performance. I think when you've not scored a goal all season, to score 3 and to score 2 and to pose the threat that we did during the match was encouraging for me.
Matt, do you think, as Gav said, that there are positives, but the biggest positive of all psychologically is that Everton didn't get beat? Yeah. Just to stop the rot, because obviously we see it time and time again, don't we, where you can easily just start one game, lose to 2 to 3 to 4, and before you know it, you've lost 5 or 6 in the bounce. In football, it's that simple.
Yeah, and it's I think when Decore scored, you're thinking, right, here we go, we're sound. This is all going to be fine. And then
was you?
When that ball comes off Archer's foot, hits the post, and hits the back of Pickford's head, you're thinking, oh no, here we go again. We're not going to be fine. This isn't all right. So I think at half time, if someone had said to me, would you take a point here? It probably would have been because it just felt like, again, one of those matches where I think Everton hadn't played particularly well, but you think, God, if someone just go for us here, we'd probably be in a much better position. I think Gav's highlighted all the positives there from the game as well. I think what I was most disappointed with was that I think the 2 worst 10-minute spells Everton had in the game were directly after they scored both of the goals. I think after we go 1-0 up, Sheffield United are on the ropes, not quite sure about the way they're playing. Their fans are getting a bit nervous. We have that breakaway, don't we, with the 4-on-2 with Danjuma, which he doesn't manage to make anything of. And then in the second half, as Joe said there, we come out in the first 15 minutes and play really well, probably our best 15 minutes of the match, certainly some of our best football of the season. You get that goal, it's in front of the away end, everyone's right up for it. You're thinking, right, go on now, kick on. And they didn't really know. They just look like a team that doesn't really know quite how to take the initiative yet. The goal we scored initially was kind of like, a bit of a scruffy one, a bit sort of came out of nothing. And then they didn't really know whether to push on or sit in. And then again, at the start of the second half, they get that goal. It's like, right, we're level now. And they didn't know whether to go on, try and win the game or just sit in and hang on. So, that indecision, that lethargy a little bit in the performance for those 2 10-minute spells was the main disappointing part for me. But like you've all said, to get a point is good when we've lost our first 3 games, which sounds very, very obvious to say.
Joe, there was one, I think, a huge positive for Everton. Not so much the point or the fact they scored goals, and that was the performance of Beto. After coming off the bench against Doncaster on Wednesday night, he was handed his first Premier League start. And I thought he'd done. I know he obviously was culpable of missing the dragging an effort wide, probably his only clear-cut opener of the game, the start of the second half. But I think overall it was a really impressive performance from Everton, and it builds hope and gives confidence moving forward that Everton finally solved and brought in a number 9 who's capable of leading the line and being a real asset.
Yeah, absolutely, and obviously given the continued absence of Dominic Calvert-Lewin and the injury problems that he's had over the past 2 seasons, and given, as we've spoken at length about on here over the summer, that Everton, this incarnation of Everton only really have one way of playing, and that is with somebody of that profile up top, then I think whatever we end up concluding about the transfer window later in this show, I think one of the biggest takeaways will be that Everton have come the closest they have to solving that goal scoring, or that striker who can spearhead a Sean Dyche attack than they have done in numerous windows. And Beto, obviously Doncaster bottom of League 2, but the intent that he showed on Wednesday night was really positive. This was somebody that wanted to make an impact straight away and show that he had the potential to do so, and I thought he was excellent at Sheffield United. Just seeing the value of somebody that can occupy defenders for 90 minutes is huge. He can compete in the air, and he has the attributes, he has the pace and the seemingly the intelligence to make those runs in the channel, so that he can always provide an outlet for an Everton side that doesn't seem to want to dominate possession. He is the difference between Jordan Pickford or a fullback or Tarkowski hammering that ball forward and it just bouncing straight back, as it would do so often when they played that way wrongly to Neil Maupay if Dominic Calvert-Lewin was absent. So, I think he is a significant positive. I liked some of his interchanges as well, some of his interplay with the likes of Danjuma. That way that when he could get free of a centre-back, he could quite often, he could control the ball and lay it off, and that just gave Everton a threat on the overlap, which they just didn't really have for much of last season. So that was really positive as well. So, I think that Everton are on their way to getting a new fan favourite there. Again, just like with Dominic Calvert-Lewin, I think the crucial thing this season will be to get themselves in a position where they're not too reliant on him. It can't all fall to him. Hopefully it won't, when you look at the squad with the players who should come back from injury, and there should be an opportunity to spread that pressure around and for lots of people to be able to contribute, and that grows with having someone like Beto up top. So I think when we look at the last 4 games and you look at 1 point, only scored goals in 1 game, and a relatively, probably as easy an opening 4 games as you could hope for in this modern Premier League, there's a lot to be concerned about. But I think Beto's a massive positive, and I think we take that going through this international break and hopefully can build on that. And I wrote a piece this morning, right on Monday, that Dominic Calvert-Lewin should be back fit for Arsenal, and Arsenal might not be the ideal game for this, although they haven't had a good track record against them recently at Goodison Park. But Sean Dyche probably has the problem that he's been dreaming of for a long time, and that is he's got two quality front men to choose from. Yeah, it's a long time since Everton have had that.
Gav, is the real positive in all this as well that this was a real baptism of fire for Beto? Obviously chucked on Wednesday night at Deco Power Stadium with his side behind to bottom of the League Two, being pretty woeful, and then chucked in at Bramwell Lane in his first Premier League bow. Again, a game of two clubs without a point to the name. The Sheffield United fans, the fact that he's come through both of them and impressed, and it's almost like he's answered both questions of can he do it in English football. He's shown Wednesday that he can, and then he's shown certainly on Saturday he's got what it takes to be a Premier League centre forward.
Yeah, based on a couple of games, Arsenal at home and a few other games, I'll pass judgment on that. But he's got the personality and character. I think that's what I like. He's obviously not a strength and violence, is he? By any stretch of the imagination. No. You can see why he's becoming a fan's favourite, because he shows you something on the pitch that doesn't he really in terms of his personality. So yeah, I really like him. I think as you say, he's had an enormous gap to fill there in terms of expectation of fans, as you say, like been looking for a striker for God knows how long. So there's big expectations there to come in too. So I think he's getting beaten now, albeit with all due respect, Doncaster's. You're thinking, there's probably harder tasks, but to come on and change the game like he did last week, I think was impressive. And I liked his work. For 70 minutes he probably tailed off, didn't he, last 20, because he's obviously not fit, he's fully fit. And he's got attributes that I don't think Calvert-Lewin's got, quite obviously. I think with the ball at his feet he's far more capable of playing players in, far more creative. I mean, there was two great bits, wasn't he? The one where he spun, the ball's played into the feet and he spun round, he played Danjuma in, and the back heels played Danjuma in the second half, which I thought was a penalty. And then that great dribble in the first half, and thinking, I can't really see Calvert-Lewin has got that intuition to do that. And I think they'll give us something that Calvert-Lewin doesn't give us. And also as well, the goal, that was a perfect. I mean, there's a lot of, I've seen it quite a bit, Everton players who will overhit that pass to Patterson, or he'll keep hold of the ball and not lay it off. And first time interim, first time away, Patterson doesn't have to break stride. And so enormously impressed by him in the two games that he's played, both his technical skills and his personality and character. And hopefully this is just the beginning of what you would hope would be a fruitful spell as a striker for us. Does give, I think, at some point down the line, if he carries on like this, a selection dilemma for Dice if he just wants to play one up front, or maybe he might go with two up front, which is probably for another day. So I mean, that I think that's a testimony for what he's done so far in his 1.5 games. Yeah, it's an interesting one.
Matt, for as productive and powerful as Beto was, Everton were also incredibly indebted to Jordan Pickford in the 99th minute, when myself and Joe Thomas looked at each other rather nervously when that ball bounced off that bar. An unbelievable save from an unbelievable goalkeeper.
Yeah, like Gav said, I think he's sort of under the radar, had a bit of a rugby start to the season. That goal against Wolves, I think he's probably going to look back on that and think, certainly in a game where Jose Sarr came and grabbed everything in the box, the contrast was quite massive there. But I think what you maybe lose sometimes with that side of Pickford's game, where he doesn't come and grab everything, you make up for with moments like that at the weekend. And listen, I know there's a lot of things made about his size and stuff like that, and people try and play him down a little bit because of that. But I think because of his stature and because of the way how agile he is, there's not many keepers that I think that would be able to save that shot there. So that header that McBurney did, and in turn be able to get up and get himself there for the second one, and then get it away for the third one with his foot as well. I mean, in some respects, I think that's quite similar, and obviously it was a completely different save, but sort of he used the same sort of qualities and characteristics as that Azpilicueta one against Chelsea a couple of years ago, where he's just got to be dead fast and dead agile. And if you compare to some other goalkeepers in the league who maybe are a bit taller, a bit rangier, that they won't be able to do that. But listen, we know what we're getting with Pickford now, and probably the reason why we didn't speak about his mistake in inverted commas against Wolves and not having as bad a start to the season is because it's become quite rare now. If you go back to maybe after his great first season, he had 2 years, probably, didn't he, where it was like, is he the right fella for Everton? He's making quite a lot of mistakes, and it would be like every couple of weeks, and you go, every time he turn a corner, you'd think, he's done something bad again there. But for the last couple of years, really, it's been 10, 15 games in a row where he's been absolutely fine. So when he does do something like against Wolves, or he doesn't have a great couple of games, you think, well, this is just a blip, because we've seen how consistent he is now and how mature he is now. So, it was an incredible save, and it's one of those, I think, isn't it, where when it's slowed down on the replays afterwards, it doesn't sort of do it justice. You have to kind of watch it in real time to see how good it is. And there's that great video, isn't there, from behind the goal from the Sheffield United fans, and one of their fans calls him a lucky something. And you say, not sure about that. There's not much fortune in that. It's about dynamism, skill, anticipation. He's a fantastic goalkeeper, and he's come to our aid again there, because I'm sure we're all sat here not talking about Beto, not talking about the positives from this game. We're talking about something very different. It's 4 defeats from 4, and played some teams around us. But yeah, absolutely fantastic to see him pull that out again.
Joe, the 2 saves against Chelsea a couple of years back sparked Everton's great escape under Frank Lampard. The penalty save with the King Power last season sparked Everton's great escape under Sean Dyche.
Only 4 games in.
We are only 4 games in, but has Jordan Pickford just produced another moment which could change Everton's season?
Yes, I think so. And the reason being partly for some of what Matt just alluded to there, it's not so much what that might mean in the course of the season from a long-term perspective, but going into this international break, had Everton lost that game, even if it would have been a harsh scoreline from a late goal, then I think that there's already a lot to talk about anyway. But if it had been 4 defeats from 4 and having lost to another team, 3 of the first 4 games, I'd argue, against teams that could become relegation rivals, and to have lost all 3 would have been an absolute disaster, regardless as to whether or not Everton. You could sit here and you could make quite a compelling case to say that Everton deserved 9 points from those 3 games. They've come far closer to getting 0 from them. They've only got 1. So I think that had he not saved that, then I think this next fortnight could be looking particularly bleak, and then it just means that the pressure ramps up for Arsenal at home and then Brentford away, those 2 games which are going to be very, very difficult. And I think, I'm not saying that they become easier with 1 point on the board than none, but there is just that little bit less pressure, and there is just a little bit more of an opportunity for a bit of confidence and optimism, and having the feeling of having something to build on going into this fortnight. Whereas you can just imagine what the mood would have been at Finch Farm had they conceded that goal. Just on Pickford generally, I think one of the things that, we often have this conversation here and within the pages of the Echo about how much we appreciate him and how differently he seems to be viewed from the outside. And one of the things I find really interesting is, obviously, people make a lot of play about his character and how he seems quite emotional on the pitch, and almost this idea that he loses his head sometimes. This wasn't necessarily the case against Sheffield United, but I think one of the really impressive signs of Pickford's maturity over the recent years has been how often he follows up one amazing save with another amazing save very soon after, which to me shows that he isn't getting carried away by he might look like he's celebrating from an amazing save, but when you think back to Chelsea and you think back to that Azpilicueta save, or from the following corner, Rudiger had that really good opportunity at the back post, and Pickford was right there to save it again. When I think of last season away at Fulham, he made that wonderful reflex save from Willian, and then produced a really, really good diving stop from a Mitrovic header seconds later from the resulting corner. And I think it just shows that all keepers have up and down moments, but Pickford's consistency, his consistent excellence, has been the difference between Everton staying in the Premier League and going into the Championship twice already. And the fact that Everton still have him in their camp, and I'm not sure that was a certainty going into the summer, certainly not going into this year. Obviously, once he signed his new contract, it became more likely. But that's something that is really good news for Everton, and for all of it that we'll talk about. Strong, are they weaker or are they stronger going forward? Just like they have potentially solved that problem, although it's early doors up top, which is probably priority number 1 for the summer, and getting Beto, a player of that format. They also have, an excellent number 1 who can be the difference for them, can be a game changer or a game saver for them between the posts, and you can't really put a price on that.
Gav, you touched on it before in terms of what you thought Everton should have had a penalty. I think it's safe to say there was some questionable refereeing decisions on Saturday, Bramall Lane. Ones in which that often left people like myself and probably many of the supporters watching at home or at Bramall Lane, had confused as to what was going on.
Yeah, there's the penalty I found quite clear. It was pretty clear cut, wasn't it? The laws of the game says, if you handle somebody outside the area and it carries on to the area, then it's a penalty. Actually says that in Law 12. I was looking at it this morning, and I've looked at the replay countless times, and when Danjuma gets into the box, he's still got his arm on him, so there's still contact there, isn't he? Then he goes down the box. That was a penalty, and I just found that why that wasn't given was baffling, really. There was a couple of questionable bookings, wasn't it? I thought Branthwaite was unlucky because I think he won the ball, didn't he, Branthwaite? And it looks as if it was a foul because the ball rebounded back off the player, didn't it? And I thought he was unlucky. Yeah, and then overuse of the foam, though I think that was something, when they were lining up the free kick. And I just thought, that was daft, wasn't it? There's a wider conversation there about the standards of refereeing. You've seen the Man City game on Saturday and stuff. Yeah, but we can all say, typical Everton. But I think if you asked every club in the disposal of every club in the Premier League, you're getting hard done by referees this season. I would guess probably all but one. Would probably say, yeah, we are. I mean, if you're a Man United fan after that yesterday, they're just, and so it's easy to say we're being penalised or targeted, but it happens to everybody. I just thought it was just poorly refereed on Saturday, and we saw a couple of bad decisions at Doncaster as well. One went against us, one didn't he, really? And they were clear cut, and I thought it was a penalty. It was a great play by Beto, by the way. I can see why he didn't give the red card, because I think the Sheffield United player was just come across. It might have been marginal, but I don't think it was enough. He was that far away. You could say that Danjuma had a straight run on goal. I think that the United player might have been able to just get in front of him before he shot. So I can see why it wasn't a red card, but it was a penalty 100% for me, and that was really disappointing.
Matt, less than 24 hours after the full-time whistle blew at Bramall Lane, as people were sat in the cornflakes and reading the Sunday paper yesterday, Demari Gray decides to take to Instagram, social media, and drop what can only be described as a bomb. With a message that we don't know for certain is aimed at Sean Dyche, but we certainly think it was aimed at Sean Dyche, and the fact that even though he's not in his plans, Everton are not allowing him to leave. This is all getting very, very messy, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I was working alongside Joe Thomas, and when it came through, it just reminded me of that scene from The Wire where they talk about the Sunday morning truce, and nothing should happen on a Sunday morning. And there's Demari Gray just dropping, like you said, a big bombshell. Listen, it's one of them, isn't it? I think it's been interesting to see people form fully fledged opinions on this online in regards to whether this is entirely Demari Gray's fault or whether this is all because of what Sean Dyche has done. When the reality is, I think, none of us really quite know what's going on here and what the situation is. I think the things that we can say is that Gray's been linked with a move away for a lot of the summer. I think it's probably fair to say, again, but we don't know this, that Dyche probably doesn't fancy him as a player because he only played him at the end of last season in games when he had to, when Calvert-Lewin, when McNeil and when Iwobi were all fit, they all played, and Gray was on the bench. But I didn't realise the extent to which there's an apparent level of animosity between them to the point where Gray's felt like he's had to do this. You compare it to a situation yesterday where Jadon Sancho's come out and put a statement out. That was on the back of his own manager coming out and calling him out in front of everybody in public. This has just come on the back of, I think there was some speculation on Sunday morning that a move had been agreed to a Saudi Arabian team. But that was again following on from Sean Dyche saying in his press conference to Joe and yourself afterwards that Gray's probably going to stay and we're going to look to reintegrate him into the side. So it's just one of those. It's just weird, the timing of it, and I'd love to know what's gone on and what's made Demari Gray think, right, this is the final straw now. I'm going to go on Instagram on Sunday morning and do this post, and it's just the last thing Everton need, isn't it? Because I think after Saturday, you've got the points. The squad feels like it's sort of settled going into the other side of the international break, and you're thinking, right, it's not perfect, but this and this, we can reintegrate Gray, and now this comes out, and it just adds to I know Sean Dyche was quick to dismiss the idea of this is a crisis or a circus, but when you see stuff like that, you just roll your eyes and think, oh God, not again, Everton. Never one quiet day. So just disappointed to see, and I can't honestly sit here and say it's Dyche's fault, it's Gray's fault, but it just adds to the ongoing undercurrent of a crisis and calamity that's sort of underpinned Everton for a long time now.
Joe, me and you were talking about this yesterday via message, and after what Sean Dyche said to you on Saturday, when obviously you asked him where Demari Gray stood now and what the plan was for him, does this feel almost like a bit of a final, one last power play push by Demari Gray to try and force a way out of Everton this one, because he knows he's not in Sean Dyche's immediate thinking, in the sense of he's not going to be a starter when he's fit?
I don't know is the honest answer, and as Matt says there, I think we will only certainly at this present moment in time we don't really know what's going on behind closed doors. I think that it's been an interesting little mini drama over the past 8 weeks or so, and there may have been a degree of inevitability that it might end up in a situation like this, and I think that to some extent this, whoever's fault this may have been both predictable and preventable. Demari Gray hasn't been involved in any of the first team matches since he came back from international duty with Jamaica. That includes pre-season, Premier League, and even the Doncaster game, which might have been an obvious one to bring him in. Throughout that time, when I've been asking him, Dyche has maintained that that's been a fitness issue. When I asked Dyche about it, his absence against Sheffield United on Saturday for the first time, he said, well, fitness and the noise, the speculation around his future, which has probably been the most persistent of all the speculation around Everton players this summer. And I think that, when we had the post-match press conference, I started asking the questions. I was the first person to ask Dyche from the written press about them, and Dyche brought Demari Gray into the conversation, not me. So he was proactively looking to get his name out there to talk about, or to at least infer that he's going to reintegrate him. I was asking, one of my earlier questions was the absences about Michael Keane and Lewis Dobbin, who I understood had both picked up knocks before, and I was just trying to confirm that. And Dyche essentially used that as an entry point to then talk about, obviously, post-transfer deadline day and the departures of 3 players that have already been involved in Premier League fixtures this season for Everton, basically trying to make the point that when you bring back everybody that's injured into the fore, he believes he's got a squad that he can still work with. And as part of that, he started mentioning Demari Gray, which then I asked about him, and obviously mentioned Saudi and the fact that their window's still open, and he said that he still believed, he expected that Demari Gray would remain an Everton player. Well, less than 24 hours later you see that, then clearly someone's got their wires crossed. And I think we'll move on to the transfer window, obviously. It felt very likely that Demari Gray was going to move on, and I think that those of us on the outside had that impression for certainly the last few weeks. I don't know what conversations have been had, but I imagine that Demari Gray also had that impression. Like Matt says, you got the impression that towards the end of last season that Dyche didn't see him as part of his first team plans, even when there were difficulties up top with selection. He still appeared reluctant to use Demari Gray. One of the most obvious, I think, was that draw at Leicester, where you look at the last 15 minutes, Everton are back to 2-2, and it felt like there was a game that could have been won there, and Dyche didn't turn to the substitutes bench, which Gray was on. So it's all very intriguing. One of the weird subplots, and it's difficult to read too much into it because I don't really know what's happened, but there's been a lot of talk about Demari Gray's shirt number since Jack Harrison came in. Jack Harrison wore number 11 at Leeds, and 11 forms part of his Twitter handle. That's Demari Gray's number. One of the things I found really interesting on Saturday, I tweeted about it, was that on the back of the Sheffield United programme, number 11 in the Everton squad was Jack Harrison. Demari Gray wasn't anywhere to be seen. Now, okay, they're not going to have the most up-to-date. Holgate was still in there, Mopé was still in there, Iwobi was still in there, but Demari Gray not being anywhere to be seen, somebody else having his shirt number, I don't know how that's come to pass, but I'd be surprised if someone from Sheffield United has taken a flyer and just gone, Jack Harrison's probably number 11. I mean, Jack Harrison was number 30 in the Doncaster programme list. He was numberless in the other programmes. He's got number 0 on the Everton website, and he's numberless on the Premier League website, where the Premier League website has Demari Gray as number 11. So there's a fascinating backdrop to all this. We don't know the full story, and I think it's difficult to apportion blame to anyone at this point, or to kind of see how this is necessarily going to be resolved. It might be that no one's blameless. It might be just be that people have got their wires crossed and it's just innocent, bits of frustration or whatever. But quite clearly that there is now a problem. Dyche couldn't have been clearer. If you take his words at face value, he was clearly talking about Demari Gray coming back into that squad, being an option, talking about him getting fit and being available in weeks' time, which obviously takes us past the Saudi Arabian transfer window. So again, I asked him about, and he said he expected Gray to stay there. So for 18 hours later, Gray to be coming out and saying that, it's a drama that Everton could have avoided. It's become a problem that might, that they could do without. Where his future lies now and how it does. I think, I don't know, I've spoken a long time on this. I think the most interesting next step for us all to watch out for is Jamaica over this international break. Because with Dyche having cited fitness concerns behind Gray's absence for so long, if all of a sudden he was to go and start playing 90 minutes for Jamaica, now different managers, different trainers have different thresholds for fitness or things like that, but I mean, you would perhaps question why he's considered fit enough to do that for international duty, but not to make a bench which Everton only had 4 senior outfield players, one of which Dyche acknowledged that he'd brought back from injury earlier than he would have preferred to for a Premier League game against a potential relegation rival. So, I don't know what's going on behind the scenes. We may never find out. We may see more of it, more dirty laundry washed aired in public over the coming days. Goodness knows what, but it is, as Matt says, it's just another day with another drama and another issue that everyone has to deal with. And after what Dyche said on Saturday, I think everybody would have hoped that there was a positive ending to this that we could all moved on from, and now that looks in doubt.
Gav, I think Joe's right, isn't he? This is a drama and a mess that is only probably going to have to end in one way, and that's Demari Gray possibly leaving the club, because how does he come back from this? It's such an outlandish statement to make, isn't it?
I was thinking about all this about how the media changed over the years. Instagram of a Sunday morning years ago, be back of a tabloid, wouldn't it? Demari Gray exclusive, my Everton torment. With them picture of him looking glum, sitting on a dustbin, sitting on a dustbin or something like that. So it's just funny how the world's changed. I think you can criticise the club how from the playing side, where he's by I think his admission by Dyche said he's not in the squad, he's not trained, he's obviously, there's been a certain amount of exclusion there, and these normally only end up with one way, doesn't the player leaves. I noticed the Turkish deadline is a week after the Saudi, and he's been linked with Turkey, hasn't he? So that has to happen. I can't. And the other thing that's puzzling me, for a club that needs cash, there's a player there that Bices openly, going back about selection last year, and we've got more options now, I would argue, in that area of the pitch what we had last year. But he's openly excluded them because of, I think we're talking about his work rate probably is not enough for a Dyche team. And so he's not going to feature, and so, we need cash, so you sell him, and he's unhappy. That has to be the only logical step here. I can't understand why. Maybe we're going to talk about the transfer window. Maybe we didn't get enough in the transfer window. We still think there's a role for him. But to me, that appears to be the only option here. You don't want an unhappy player, around the parish there at Finch Farm and stuff, who's quite openly unhappy. You need to move it on. And if you get a bit of cash, it's a win-win for everybody, isn't it? Really. And the whole thing's a little bit baffling, and it's something we don't need.
Matt, one man who is no longer an Everton player, we spoke about it at length on Thursday, ahead of the move, but obviously it was confirmed in the early hours on Saturday morning, is Alex Iwobi. I think the most telling thing from this transfer was Sean Dyche's comments before the game on Saturday at Bramwell Lane, when he was asked by TNT Sport about the departure of Iwobi, and he said somebody didn't want to lose, but the club's business model meant that, you know, Everton were unable to reject the offer what Fulham put on the table. Again, this feels like the club's reckless spending of yesteryear has come back to haunt.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because we've got a player who the manager doesn't want to lose, who's essentially having to go because of the business model. It doesn't look great, does it?
Yeah, of course, and it's one of those things with Everton at the moment, isn't it? Like, I think we can all look at certain aspects and decisions we're making and going, well, this is the right thing to do, but because of things that have gone in the past, it's meant that they can't necessarily do the right thing. You get what I mean?
Yeah.
They're tripping over themselves constantly because of bad decisions in the past. And yeah, I thought it was quite an interesting change in tack from Dyche at the weekend in what he had to say, because I think whenever he's been asked about transfers in the squad and not having certain players, etc., up until Saturday, it's been a case of, well, we just have to deal with what we've got, you know, we've got quality here, etc. Whereas he was a lot more open about that, wasn't he, on Saturday? And I think he spoke a lot about the business model before the game. He spoke a lot about it afterwards as well. And you kind of got the sense, and again, I don't want to put words in his mouth, that he's not happy about this. He was a little bit perturbed by it, you know, to use a mild phrase from that point of view. Because as much as Iwobi divides opinion, he started, I think, every game under Dyche last season. He didn't play in a position that suited him, I don't think. I think he's probably better as a centre midfielder or off the left. I don't think he's as effective on the right, but Dyche started him every game.
He never complains, seemingly, either.
Doesn't really kick up a fuss, doesn't really get injured. Ironically, he is injured at the moment, but he played a lot of games last season, can play in loads of different positions as well. So I think Dyche, obviously, I think because Iwobi's like quite a flamboyant, creative, technical player. I think sometimes you look at Dyche and think, well, he's not going to like him. But I think he obviously appreciates his work rate, doesn't he, as well? You know, one of the things about Iwobi, in addition to all the stats about his chance creation, is that ball recoveries, distance cover, you know, all those sorts of stats, he's really high up. And I think Dyche would have appreciated those. So I think, he didn't want to lose him, but I think we could talk about the player, what he offers, where he fits in, what the manager thinks, but this is all those topics are dwarfed by the club's financial situation, aren't they? And Iwobi's contract situation. excuse me. And ultimately, if Everton get offered £20 million for a player with 1 year left on the contract, given the way things are, they've got to sell them, and that sort of overrides any footballing or tactical or selection dilemma at the moment. And that's just the way it is. And hopefully, it's not that way for much longer because of these decisions we're making right now. But for the foreseeable future, it feels like that's kind of. Yeah, we are where we are with that.
Is this the most worrying thing, Joe, from the whole Alex Iwobi before? Because obviously, you know, me and Matt spoke on Thursday, but it feels like there's probably never been an Everton player who divides the opinion as much as Alex Iwobi in terms of, you know, those who rate him, those who don't rate him, those who, you know, in the middle. But is the biggest thing of all this is that ultimately Sean Dyche has lost a player or been forced to lose a player he didn't want to lose?
Yeah, I think my kind of takeaway from the transfer deadline day, rather than the window itself, and include the sale of Tom Cannon in this, was it was essentially a bit of a brutal reminder of the financial situation that Everton find themselves in. I don't like the sale of Alex Iwobi. I can understand the financial merit of it, £22 million for a player, not only who's out of contract in 11 months, but a new contract talks have been ongoing for 11 and a half months now and not reached a conclusion. There is definitely a financial case for this sale. There's also a footballing case for this sale to a certain extent as well, because I really like Alex Iwobi. I think he's one of the most talented players in that squad. It didn't look as though Dyche was going to play him in his most effective position, and if you're not going to play him in that kind of left centre midfield that he was so effective for, so creative for under Lampard, just unfortunately one of the reasons he probably doesn't get the credit he deserved was he was creative at a time when there was no one to finish the chances that he was creating. You know, so if you're going to play him out of position on the right wing, then okay, and they've already brought in, you know, other players that might be able to do that, then again that strengthens the cases to sell him. But for me, I think that it's a poor's harsh. I think it's a wrong decision. I think that Everton have a threadbare squad, and in Alex Iwobi, what they have is they have a player who very rarely gets injured. They have a player that, you know, gives 100%. They have a player who, in 2 relegation battles, has stood up and been counted. You know, he's fought successfully for being a big part of both of those relegation survivals under both Lampard and Dyche. And in a squad that doesn't have many players, he is someone who can play right back, right midfield, right wing back, somewhere across the centre midfield, left wing, left midfield as well. Albeit many of those aren't his preferred position, but that versatility combined with the resilience, the physical resilience that he has, and obviously the psychological, the willingness to be part of a fight, they're all valuable attributes to have in a squad that is so limited. I would be really interested to know what the conversations were. With the impression that I get, this might be false, this might be wrong. Yeah, put my hands up if it is. But it feels like Demari Gray was always the one that was likely to go, and that perhaps Fulham came in late with a big money bid for Alex Iwobi. And the conversation may well have been, well, we're getting a hell of a lot more money here for a player who's out of contract next year. Demari Gray is as well, but Evan had the option to extend that. This way we can get more money, and what we'll do is we'll keep that Demari Gray. And if that is the case, and I think that has already proven to be a miscalculation, because if, and I stress it's an if, I don't know, but if that was the case, what you've done is you've got rid of a happy player that can play multiple roles, important roles within the squad, and you've kept someone that you were also going to get money for, albeit less for, that, well, we've seen what's happened since then. So that's an intriguing one. But yeah, Alex Iwobi, same with Tom Cannon. You know, was he going to be part of the first team squad or a big part of the first team squad this season? Almost certainly not. But this is a player who, England's under-21s are European champions, and they're currently trying to poach him from the Republic of Ireland at the minute. This is a player who's already shown that he can score goals consistently at the championship level. This is the most talented player in Everton's academy. If you can't allow someone like him the opportunity to continue his development and potentially have a pathway into the first team, maybe not this season, but maybe in a couple of years to come, then, for the cost of £7.5 million by the end of it, then that's a really frustrating and disappointing situation to be in. It might be the realities of the situation. It's a lot of money for someone that hasn't scored a Premier League goal, and I can see the financial merit in that as well. But my big takeaway from the transfer deadline day was simply that this is the sting in the tail of what being a relatively positive window up to that point. The sting being that Everton's financial situation is such that when push comes to shove, if people coming off of hard cash for players that still might have a role to play in Everton's present or future, the club have to take it. And that might ultimately be the right thing at the end of the day, because they need to pay the bills, they need to keep the money to keep going. But it's sad that it's got to that.
Gav, Alex Iwobi, a player you'll miss, or one you're quite happy to see leave?
I think a player I'll miss for his hard work and his consistency in terms of he's being available, and he's shown fight when at the big moments. Scored that crucial goal at Leicester, wasn't it, when we got beat 2-1 last year? So, he doesn't score many. Yeah, and I get that. But I think in any situation we are as a club, if a player's in his last year's contract and it's quite clear that actually they're not going to renew, and you get a £20 million offer, if you were 10th in the table, you'd probably take it, wouldn't you? Really? I'm not so sure that actually we should say, well, actually it's a cash situation that Everton have got themselves into that we need that cash. I think if you were 10th in the table and relatively stable, you'd probably say, yeah, take 20 million quid for somebody that we paid 35 million for, and we've had 4.5 years off him. I think that's just a sound deal, really, because we can't have it both ways as fans. There's just how many players have left that we paid big money for over the last 4 or 5 years for nothing at the end of their contract. We got Gababin's gone, hasn't he? But I know slightly different, 25 million, whatever you paid. Gomez is going to go. And there's been constant criticism of the club for letting assets go for nothing that we paid 40 million quid for or whatever. Put them on £100,000 a week and we've gone for zero at the end of the deal. We get 20 million for Iwobi, which I think is a really good price, by the way. I know it's all add-ons and all that, and we're still unhappy. Well, we can't have it both ways, can we, as supporters? And I think it's a good business deal regardless of our financial situation. I think that's just the sort of cherry on the cake on the deal for me. That actually, we obviously need the cash, don't we, really? And so I've not got a problem with Iwobi going. I'd say, wide left, I think Danjuma probably offers a little bit more from an attack and sends some more penetration and goals. He's got 2 already.
Gents, one last question before we finished up, but it's the biggest question of all. Matt, I will start with you. Are Everton stronger or weaker now than when the transfer window opened this summer?
the squad or the first 11?
The squad, because obviously, like we've seen, the first 11, getting the first 11 on the pitch is quite a hard task.
I think the squad is stronger, and I think the first 11 is probably about the same. I think losing Mina and not, Branthwaite's looked great, hasn't he, so far? But I think losing Mina and that leadership, and not knowing what Seamus Coleman's going to come back like, are two big issues for me. I think centre back and full back. I think in January I'll be sitting there going, we really should have invested in those areas. So I think not replacing Mina, not having someone like Cody around, and the full back positions probably mean for me that the first 11 is about the same, offset by the arrivals of Beto and Danjuma. But I think the squad with Harrison coming in, with Chimiti coming in, with Young being a bit more versatile, I think the squad's probably just a little bit better.
What about you, Connor?
I think they are better equipped to mount more of a challenge of not being in a dogfight come March, April. I think the sign of Beto, although early doors, seems a positive one. And I think if you can get Jack Harrison, Dwight McNeil on the pitch, they won't go far wrong in terms from a talent point of view. But I do have major concerns about the full-backs. Yeah. I just don't think either side, right or left, are good enough. I know we put a cross in for the second goal on Saturday, but for me there's still massive questions over Patterson from a defensive point of view. And Young is okay at left back, but not great. But Mikalenko just looks so far off the pace that you can't even see him really putting any competition under Young to give him a run for his money in the left back states. And the two. And your also big concern is James Tarkowski's drop off in form. Yeah. Because although Branthwaite's been absolutely outstanding, Tarkowski seems to have not fallen off a cliff, but certainly not started the season very well. And you just got to hope that it's a blip in form and not his legs are starting to show his age and the fact of how much football he's played over the last sort of 5 or 6 years. Because even he played every game, didn't he, last year for Everton, and he was pretty much a regular every week for Burnley. So you've got to hope that's just a blip in form and not now he's hit 30 and all of a sudden the last 5 or 6 years of intense football is catching up on him. But I think the more equipped, provided they don't get injuries, to be comfortably mid-table and not be March, April, very, very nervous. I know that seems a far stretch given where they are, but I think if they start getting bodies back, you saw on Saturday McNeil come on and made a massive difference. Yeah, if you get Harrison back fit and put him in there, that'll make a massive difference as well. So I think the squad's more equipped, I think, but there's major concerns, certainly from a defensive point of view, which is mad because you would never have thought under Dyche the big concern would be around defence budget. You would have thought that we'd have been defensively solid, but I just don't think the personnel are good enough at the back at the minute. So I think it's going to be a very interesting international break because there seems to be a lot of hope that they'll get a certain number of bodies back by the time Arsenal roll into town. But yeah, I think they're more equipped, but maybe that's just overconfidence. What a point to Sheffield United does to you, isn't it? Yeah. But we will leave things there, gents. I think we've chewed the fat enough. Thank you very much for joining us. It might be an international break, but we won't be taking a break. We will be back towards the end of the week to talk all things Everton once again. But for today, thanks to Matt, Joe and Gav, you've been listening to the Robley Podcast.